We're doing today a passage through the Swellies at low water slack.
Yeah.
The really important things here are timing, the right time for when the period of water between the two bridges forming the Swellies Passage is slack water, and that occurs at a certain time. Second key thing is the depth of water, and we have to make sure that we go between these rocky sections, but also that we can go at times when the depth of water is okay for us to go. So we can only do that only a couple of days a month.
Right.
So today we're going to go through under the bridge and miss out a rock that's just here by following another route, and then in between a big rock called the Cribbin Rock and the shoreline, and looking back to check the leading lights that are under this bridge, and then turning to go between Swellies Rock and the shoreline, and then out into some deeper water.
Great.
And at the same time, again, making sure we miss the rock here by checking that we can still see that rock, and it's what's called open, so we completely miss the rock that's there as well. So there are 3 or 4 key points, places along here to keep an eye on as we pass through. So it makes it quite a tricky passage, and we'll do it with the tide slightly against us, so that we will have it'll help slow us down, not go too fast.
Okay, and will we be able to see this rock?
We may be able to.
I'm Catherine Dobson, and the business is called Horizon Sailing. The idea is that we provide sailing tuition and experiences for families, friends and work colleagues. The boat itself is based in North Wales, Conwy, North Wales, and we've got the chance of sailing in a beautiful area around North Wales coastline.
What does sailing bring to individuals or teams? Is there any relationship to sailing and work and business?
Sailing a sailing yacht requires a coordination of all sorts of types of activities. Usually there are several people on the boat. Someone has to steer the wheel, people have to pull ropes, someone has to go in front, someone else has to navigate. So there are several types of activities, and it's really important to coordinate the actions of everyone to make sure that the boat sails to its best performance. So in this way, there is such a combination of activities and skills required that these are like running a business, where there is strategy, there are people who need to manage resources, there are people who need to plan ahead, people who need to be working out what happens when things aren't quite going to plan, so that we need to always review what is happening. So sailing is like a business with all the components of planning, delivery, reviewing, and re-evaluating what needs to happen. So all of these together make a boat work well, and similarly they make a business act to its full value.
And tell me, what have you got planned for this trip? What's the voyage plan?
The outlined sailing plan is to work on a sailing trip which goes around Anglesey in North Wales. Not only does Anglesey provide beautiful coastline areas, there are lots of complications to do with tidal features and rocks and outcrops and lighthouses. And for business purposes, as well as for sailing purposes, this requires quite a lot of planning of what you need to do. So we need to work out when to go, what's going to happen with the wind, how we're going to get from A to B, and what time we might expect to get there. And all these things together provide a passage plan. And this is, in effect, the overall strategy or plan for the trip.
Now tell me, as an RYA instructor, what skills can people expect to learn with you?
When on a sailing yacht, there are a number of things to work out. It's important to be able to plan to manage the boat properly. And so to manage the sails, we have to adjust the sails to suit the wind conditions. That might mean sailing in a particular direction to manage the wind. Also, it might mean having to change the amount of sail, reef in the sail if the wind picks up. Otherwise, the boat might be overwhelmed by too much wind. It's always important to think about how the boat performs at its best. Many of the other activities are about how to change direction in sailing. So sailing into the wind, across the wind, and with the wind all require different sail configurations. So sailing itself, setting the sails is a really important aspect. Another aspect that we work on for courses is how to manage situations of safety. These are critical on a boat. So if someone falls overboard, it's really important, certainly around UK waters, to get them out of the water as quickly as possible. So we learn methods to pick up a person, potentially a person who has fallen overboard. And that's called man overboard recovery drill. Another activity that we work on is moorings. That is about how to come up to a mooring buoy that often are set into sections along coastlines and in attractive areas. And the idea is that you sail in towards a mooring in order to be able to stay there or rest there, stay overnight perhaps. And this forms an alternative to needing to anchor. The important thing about sailing into a mooring is that you've really got to work out what the tide is doing and what the wind is doing. Both really affect the way that the boat goes at a very slow speed through the water. So you have to make a judgment about which way is the wind blowing, which way is the tide going. And tide is king.
On a different tack, tell me about the beauty of sailing. What's the attraction of sailing and yachting?
Sailing a boat requires such a wide range of skills, techniques, and abilities and experience. It's about operating quite a complex machine in a natural environment which is constantly changing. The waves, the wind, the tide are all changing. Other vessels that are in the area affect what you're going to do. So it's really important to pay attention to the whole of the idea of running a boat. Now, what really makes me interested in this is it's not just about running the boat itself. There's a lot of physical activity. There's a lot of moving about. You're out in the open air. You have good views of the area all around. And really also what works is when there are several people together and you're making the boat work and there's a way of working together. Everyone needs to pull together to keep the boat working right. And then, in addition to that, someone else has to do the looking after, bringing the drinks, preparing the meals, making us all prepared to be able to continue to do the activity.
Catherine, just tell me about your experience, your considerable expertise as a clinical psychologist. How does this help you in your role?
My background as a clinical psychologist has provided me with a lot of ways of working with people who have so many unique ways in which they act and learn about the world themselves. Everyone brings their own contribution, not just to a boat, but to each other in the world. As far as sailing is concerned and the teaching of techniques on the boat, I particularly pay attention to whether people like to learn the sailing techniques by doing them, just getting on and doing it and seeing what happens, whether they prefer to be helped through the breakdown of what the task is and to talk through it first so that they run it through a rehearsal of that in their mind and then they can follow it through. Or thirdly, a different approach is when people like to be shown what to do so that I provide them with the guidance and detail of the steps of the way. So those are three main methods of helping people learn the techniques of sailing. One of the other additional parts to the techniques is the importance of communication with each other on the boat, how people need to use short phrases when you've got the wind to take into account, and also to trust each other on the boat. Recently, I had an experience of a husband and wife. The husband, as usual, as often is the case, was doing most of the instruction to do with managing the wheel. He was doing most of the guidance on the navigation, and I was suggesting to the wife that she learn a bit more about how to navigate, so that in unfamiliar areas he could begin to trust her for her to give him the right kind of information on which to then base the actual direction he was going to be sailing in. So this was really an important aspect to teach the couple how to communicate differently with each other on this particular aspect of sailing. With the couple in particular, we were able to work out that the wife particularly was keen on breaking the task down, thinking through it, working it all out, doing it, practicing it, and then rehearsing again, going through it in her mind as to what the different steps were. And in fact, it worked out it was a really complicated manoeuvre, a man overboard, and she was able to really accurately rehearse and tell me back what the steps were. Her husband, as a different method, was prepared just to do the activity and then just see how it worked. And he used all different aspects of how the boat functions, different sails, different aspects of the engine, and all sorts of different features of the boat in order to reach the same objective.
And finally, just tell me about your yacht. It's a Starlight Tessa Rossa. Just describe and tell me why she's such a good yacht to learning. What makes her special?
Tessa Rossa is a Starlight 39, and although she's quite an old boat by modern boat standards, 20 years old, she is very stable in kind of wave and wind conditions when a lot of boats might not consider going sailing. And as a result, it works very well on by keeping stable. It's a very comfortable ride for people who are less certain and less familiar with sailing on rougher waters. The boat itself is well insulated, so that when you're inside the boat, you often just don't hear the waves and the wind when you're outside. And so it's all very comfortable indeed. We've got on board, we have toilets for everyone. We have a cooker, a fridge, really good navigation systems, communication systems with the Coast Guard and elsewhere. We've got satellite devices, we've got a range of safety devices that make sure that everyone is safe and comfortable in the boat, as well as, should the worst happen, that we are well prepared for surviving, managing, even should we need to get into the water.
Catherine, just tell me about communications and conversations and how they help the learning process on Tessa Rossa.
When sailing a boat, there are real phases of activity. Everyone joins together to pull the sails up, to get the boat going, to carry out manoeuvres, to pay attention to really getting the boat working properly. And then what seems to happen is that there's a bit of relaxing from this. In normal cruising mode, there's a relaxing from all the activity that's happened. And in these pauses of effort, there are also times for reflection. I often find that there are lots of conversations that occur between members of the crew. And this particular time, I have been able to incorporate into my way of providing the sailing experiences by allowing for time for conversation, acknowledging that people have phases of activity and these pauses for reflection. And in these pauses for reflection, it's possible to talk about all sorts of matters that could be personal, they could be things which are just normal conversations that people have about family and friends and everyday life. However, what I've also done is how to build such pauses of reflection and focus them on, for example, business issues. So I prompt people into having conversations about how their business is doing. Also include sometimes on the crew a coach, a business coach, who can work with colleagues coaching colleagues who are also on the boat, and they can have extensive conversations about current business issues. And in this way, it's possible to have conversations about work whilst not at work, but yet completely separate from and away from work. And this provides a real opportunity for reflecting, not just on how you are thinking and working through business issues, but it's also a chance to do that for a short period of time.
What's your most memorable occasion sailing, and what biggest learning point have you had?
One of the most triumphal moments for sailing was on finishing the Three Peaks yacht race. This was in June 2012, when I was sailing with, I was skippering the boat with my son and a friend of his. And there were 3 people who were sailing the boat, and we also had 2 runners. And the idea is that we start the boat, sailing the boat from mid-Wales up to Fort William in Scotland, and the runners run up the mountains of Snowdon, Scafell and Ben Nevis, and the whole event is called the Three Peaks Yacht Race. The major triumph about this event was being able to overtake about 10 yachts whilst we took a narrow channel that we judged we had the right kind of current for. And we just managed to sail very well under spinnaker for several hours, and with my son also navigating as an expert yachtsman, international yachtsman. He could navigate very carefully the currents and watch and see and spot what was happening on the water. So I was using his incredible technical skills for seeing the water and planning what to do and the tactics of how and when to jibe the spinnaker. So when we arrived at Fort William, it was just a really incredible feat and effort and pleasure to have been able to sail such an event.